set up. Again, I want to welcome you to the Tips and Strategies webinar. And first of all, I do have the chat up, so if anyone has a question that you want to bring up to Sue and she can type it in for me, we can do it that way. Or don't hesitate also to just unmute your microphone if you just want to jump in with a question. I like to keep this very casual, so don't be shy about interrupting me at any time. Okay, so for today, I believe we have, well, how many people do they have, Brendan? 155?
125.
125, wow. Okay, well, I will try to keep this as interactive as possible. Of course, you don't have the pleasure of me sitting there right with you, which I'm sure you're all very crushed over. But for today's purpose, one thing you need to know is that today is not about content. Okay, what we're doing today is we've put together the most important tips and strategies that can help you impact your score basically immediately. So if I have any AAA scholars in the room, you'll be happy to know I'm not going to be boring you with a lot of content that you may already know and thoroughly understand. For those of you in the room who may feel that you struggle a bit more scholastically, don't be afraid. I'm not going to be frustrating you with any scholastic concepts that you may struggle to understand. So the beauty of this is we've kind of packaged it in a way where everyone can equally benefit from these tips and strategies. And it's my understanding that there's a number of you that are going to be taking this exam on Tuesday. So the good news with this is that I don't have a lot of action plan items for you that you're not going to be able to fit in between today and test day. Okay? So with that, I'm just going to jump right in and first share with you that there are 5 critical factors that we've identified that keep students from scoring their maximum potential. And the first one is simply just a lack of knowledge and the test format and content. So we're going to get you a bit familiar with that. But the best example I can have is I remember when I was in school, and if I were leaving to go to school, my mom would say something to me like, you know, Maureen, when we get back, we're going to be having a talk. And the whole day I would have all this anxiety and this pit in my stomach, like, oh my gosh, what am I in trouble for? What did I do? What does she need to talk to me about? And then I would stress out all day, and I would get home, and it would be something as simple as, you know, you need to start picking up the wet towels from the floor or something like that. And I would be like, oh my gosh, that's what you wanted to talk about? I thought it was something much, much worse. So really, it's like the fear of the unknown, and that creates a higher level anxiety. Testing anxiety is an issue for students, and it can distract you from focusing on what you really need to be focusing on. So we're going to help you with that today, so that when you walk away, you feel more familiar with the knowledge and the content that you're going to be encountering on Tuesday. Lack of test-taking strategies. With most students, their strategy is simply, I'm going to walk into the test when the proctor says time, I'm going to get through as many questions as I can, and that's their strategy. You need to be thinking of this as a competition. This is no different than a football game. If your football team were going up against your largest rival this coming Friday, I promise that the coach would not be going in with some sort of strategies. You're competing against 1.8 million other students that are looking for acceptance into the same colleges and are vying for the same scholarship dollars. So you need to have some strategies, and we're going to make sure that that's something we help you with today. Test-taking anxiety. I talked a little bit about that just a minute ago, but this is a very real thing. I don't know if, I'm sure that there's a number of you in the room who feel that when you study for a test, you know the information, you're prepared for it, and that yet you go in and the grade that you get doesn't reflect your knowledge of the content, which can be very frustrating. Test-taking anxiety actually affects a little over 30% of students nationwide. It is a real thing. So it's not a cop-out that some students are trying to say, well, I just have testing anxiety. That's very real. And so we're going to focus on what you can do to do your best and kind of eliminate some of that anxiety. Another thing is poor time management. The reality is that most of you are not used to having to take timed tests. I know that today even it's very common for teachers to allow you to take the test home and bring it back the next day. So one of the things that they've done on this test is by design, they've shortened it. So that's one of their strategies for figuring out who the geniuses are amongst the rest of us. And so if they see that a section takes on average 60 minutes to complete, they're only going to give you 45 minutes. And again, that's something that they do on purpose. So we have some time management tips that we're going to give you so that you can maximize the small amount of time that you are given. And then this last one isn't necessarily anything I can help you out with, but it is something to be aware of. I know you've heard it a million times, but it is proven that students who have a good night's rest tend to test better. So for those of you that are night owls in the group, I wouldn't suggest going to bed early just the night before the exam because your body won't be used to that. So maybe just try to go to bed, say a half hour earlier, a couple nights beforehand, so that you get into the habit of getting to bed in time so that you can get a solid night's rest before the exam day. Okay? A couple quick myths that I would like to dispel for you also. Hold on one second here. Brendan, is there a way that I can change the slides by clicking instead of having to roll that thing? No. Let's try that. No. And that's not right. No. Oh, but it's that. Okay. I think I just, let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yay. I figured it out. Okay. So a couple of things you may have heard that I just wanted to dispel. There are no trick questions on the test. Once they're explained, you'll see that there truly is only one clear answer on the exam. It's not, well, if you look at it this way, the answer could have been D. Sometimes we get away with that with our teachers and they'll give us the credit for it. That's not going to happen for this exam. There is only one right answer. The correct answers do not form any special pattern. So I know a very common practice is if you don't know the answer, choose B or C because they're the most common answer options. That's not the case on this exam. They actually have to ensure that A is the answer 25% of the time, B ends up being 25%, C and D. All choices are therefore equally likely to occur. And another important thing that will come up when we talk about time management is that the directions are the same on every test. Okay, so you won't have to worry about anything changing on exam day from what we discussed today. Okay, so this is your first time management tip, number one. Actually, these are 4 quick ones that I'm just going to give to you all in a row. The first one is make sure when you go in to sit down at the exam, you're not going to be allowed to open the book. If you do, they're going to take it away. So you have to leave it closed, but put the time that you start, write that time on the top right corner. The proctor is supposed to be telling you when there's only 5 minutes left, but human error occurs. Sometimes they may look down and realize that they missed it. But if it's 10:37, write that down so that when you're looking around and you're trying to manage your time, which we'll talk about, all of a sudden you'll look and not be sure exactly when the test ends if you don't remember that it started at 10:30, that section started at 10:37. So you'll need to be able to manage the time so that you can so you want to put that in the front of your book. The other thing is in order to manage the time, you need to know what the time is. Bring a watch. I know usually I can do these boot camps and we'll have 300 kids in the room, and I ask anyone who's wearing a watch to raise their hand, and I get as few as five hands in the air. So you're used to using your cell phones. They will not allow those into the exam room. So if you have to borrow one from your great grandmother, go get it and make sure that you bring that so that you can manage the time. They should have a clock in the room, but sometimes it might be far away, difficult to see behind you, whatnot. A third quick time management tip is, remember, you're going to be working off of a bubble sheet. So you'll have the exam booklet, and then to the side of that will be your bubble sheet. What you want to get into the practice of doing is do an entire page of the questions before transferring your answers to the answer sheet. It's been proven, there's 2 reasons you want to do this. First of all, from a time perspective, it's been proven that you can save up to 4 to 5 minutes by doing this, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when you get into the exam, you'll see how quickly these sections go by. So just by the practice of, okay, question A is 37, you go over, you scroll down 37, then you scroll over to A, you circle it in, then you have to go over to the next question. That back and forth is very time consuming. The second reason that you want to do this is it will help eliminate the possibility of you accidentally bubbling in the sheets incorrectly. I know I was guilty of this several times. Nothing is more frustrating that when you go to bubble in the answer for question 47 and you realize that for some reason you're on number 48. And you have to go back, erase, because you skipped one line. And talk about testing anxiety. You have to go back, erase all your answers, rebubble them in, and this will help eliminate the possibility or chance of you doing that. And then finally, never ever put your pencil down. So it'll be very, very tempting to do this. If you do have the luxury of ending any section with additional minutes available, again, this is a competition. So if you're ahead by 7 points in a basketball game and there's 2 minutes left, you don't sit down in the middle of the court and say, well, I'm already winning. Okay, you're competing against as many students out there as possible. Even if you use that time to guess on ones you didn't know, there's a probability that you're going to guess correctly. So you want to gather as many points as possible. You might want to feel that you need to give your brain a little bit of a rest. I'm not suggesting that you go back and redo the questions, but go to ones to make sure, did you fill them in correctly? Did you bubble them in correctly? If you don't bubble them in correctly, sometimes you don't get credit for them when it scans through, so you want to make sure that they're dark, complete circles on the bubble sheet. But just make sure that you're using that time to your advantage if you have it. Okay? And again, Sue, I'm assuming you're proctoring this over there, or if there's someone else I should be referencing when I call out a name, let me know. But feel free again to unmute or to chat in if any of the students have any questions at any time. Okay, so testing strategy number 1. This one is to eliminate bad answers. Oh, hold on. I don't know why that just happened. Okay, there we go. Eliminating bad answers. Okay, so, oh, sorry. No, I'm on a different slide here than you. There we go, sorry. Never ever leave a blank on the ACT. So the question comes, if you don't know the answer, do you leave it blank, or do you risk answering it correctly? There's some confusion about this because there were some changes that were made to the ACT scoring just this fall. And on the SAT, when you would answer a question, if you answered it incorrectly, you would be docked 1/4 of a point. So there was a lot of confusion of, oh my gosh, well, if you don't know, don't risk losing that 1/4 of a point. That's not the case, actually. So you want to go ahead and you want to make sure that you bubble it in. If you look at how many questions, first of all, you don't get docked on the ACT. So at this point, it's just at least guess and give yourself the opportunity to guess correctly. Okay, if you're going to skip a question because you don't know the answer and you're planning on coming back to it, make sure to circle it so that you don't forget about it. If it's a question where if you had until kingdom come to get the answer and you know you'll never be able to know how to do that question, don't circle it to come back to it. You don't want to waste your time on something you know you're not going to get. Just go ahead and guess and hope that perhaps you guessed correctly. Okay. Testing strategy number 2, eliminate bad answers. Okay, the reason that you want to eliminate bad answers is, first of all, just draw a line through them. So the reason this is going to help you is, let's say you're reading a paragraph and you have 4 answers to choose from. As you read through them, you might think, okay, well, I know for sure D is not the answer, and I know B is not the answer, but I'm not sure about A or C, so I'm going to come back to it. If you come back to it after you've read 30 or 40 additional questions, you're not going to remember which ones were definitely bad answers, and you're not going to be fresh on what the paragraph was about. So at least this will eliminate the possibility of spending time on bad answers. And if you don't have time to review it when you go back to it, when you realize you only have 1 minute left, at least now you have a 50% probability of guessing correctly as opposed to a 25%. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, time management tip number 5, never read the directions. Okay, so sometimes when I say this, if there's teachers in the room, they look at me like I'm from another planet. Usually that doesn't sound like good advice, but on this test it is, and the reason is that if you look at some of the different sections on the exam, the question directions themselves can be a full page of reading. Okay, so what you want to do is familiarize yourself with what the directions are. Today, maybe when we take a break, which reminds me, Sue, if there's a time when you all need to take a break, or if I'm forgetting about a rest break or anything, just shout over to me, and we can take 5 minutes whenever that's good for you all. So just know that the directions aren't going to change between now and test date, so we'll get ourselves familiar with those today, and then you can feel comfortable when the practice says time, just skip that page altogether and move right into the test questions. Okay, so English. Now on the English section, there's two things that they're going to be consistently testing you on, and that is the rhetorical skills and usage and mechanics. Okay, so usage and mechanics, to give you an example of how that works, is usage and mechanics is kind of the rules to grammar. So they're going to be looking to, do you know your punctuation? Do you know sentence structure? Do you know how to put sentences together? So a good analogy is if you're building a car, it's okay, does it have the 4 tires? Does it have the steering wheel? Does it have the engine? Does the engine run? That sort of thing. And then when they go into rhetoric skills, what they're asking is, do you then know how to use the components of the English language and put them together correctly? So now it's, how fast does the car run? Does it corner well? Does it stop quickly? So it's kind of, one is just the core components of putting a sentence together, grammar and punctuation and whatnot. And then the use or the rhetorical skills is then, how do you take those rules and use them to create eloquent, well-meaning sentences? So in order to test you on these two concepts, there's 3 rules of economy that they use throughout the entire section. One is redundancy, and redundancy refers to repeating the text. Okay, so it's saying the same thing over and over, and what that tells what it tells them is that you don't have confidence in the way that you initially structured the sentence, so you're trying to say it again and again in different ways to make sure you get your point across. So they'll be testing you on that throughout the English section. Okay, verbosity. Verbosity is just being too wordy. It's a sentence that could be 5 words, you've turned into 12 words. Okay, again, you want to make sure that you're using your words wisely, and they'll test you on that throughout the English section. And then finally, it's what's called irrelevance. You might have heard this referred to as deadlog in the in classes, but basically it's information that's not directly tied to the message or the passage or the point at hand. Okay, so they want to make sure that you can recognize when things need to be cut out or they're not pertinent to that specific point. Okay, so testing strategy number 3 here is to be looking for all 3 of these things. Now, redundancy, for example, one of the things that when you look at these 3 examples, I want to explain is that these examples come from, normally, again, if you had the wonderful pleasure of me sitting with all of you, I'd be giving you a practice test where you'd have an idea of what the English section looks like. So the example, I'm sure you're all extremely bummed that you're not allowed to take the English test today, but what I'd be showing you are examples from that test that you had been tested on. So for example, there was a question in there where there was a sentence that said, basically, he was very clever and smart for this idea. And they asked you if you should line it out, if you should put a comma in between. And one of the options was simply to take out the word "and" smart. And if you think about it, clever and smart essentially say the same thing. It's redundant. You don't need both of those to get your point across. Within a year, this was a sentence where it said, this company reduced increased their productivity by 20% within the year, having reduced it by $80,000 over the course of the year. So if at the end of the sentence it already says over the course of the year, you don't need to have within a year earlier in the sentence. Defiant civil disobedience. I don't even need to give you the sentence there. Clearly, defiant and disobedient, again, is redundant. So one of the answer options would have been to line out or delete either defiant or disobedience. So just make sure that, and you'll get lots of questions like that throughout the English section. So just make sure that you're looking for that. For some reason, when I started these strategies, you saw that I was off a slide. It was because right now we're going into English. So I just wanted you all to know that most of these tips that we're talking about right now are going to be referencing the English section. And in the English section, you're going to be having 45 minutes to complete 75 questions, just as a little FYI for you, if you didn't know that. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're looking for redundancy. And then the other word I mentioned as they're looking for that is verbosity. And verbosity, again, just means wordiness. So that the strategy that you want to use here is that when in doubt, take the word out. Okay, so and if that's an option and it makes the answer shorter, and it still makes just as much sense, that's going to be the option that you're going to use. The example that we had from the test is it said, every roof on every conceivable building on every continent in the world. Well, clearly that we know that if we're talking about every roof in the world, that's going to include every building, and that's going to include every continent. So in this example, you would want the answer to simply be every roof in the world. Okay. This is a big strategy here that's a great, in my opinion, a great guessing strategy. It works either way, but if you have a question where one of the answer options is either omit or delete, so this is what it looks like here. So they're asking you a question about unbricking a kiln after a fire is like a person, and we don't have the rest of the question there, but it doesn't matter for the sake of this example. Can you see my cursor, by the way, Sue? You just want to throw a chat over to me or let me know. I'm going to keep using it unless you tell me otherwise. But you see over here, you have no change, meaning the sentence is great just the way it is. You'll have no change as answer option A for every single one of these questions, by the way, in English. So no change just means nope, it's great the way it is. Or you'd want to change the word someone to, or a person to someone, or you'd want to change it to a potter, or you'd want to omit it altogether. The nice thing here is that whenever you see this as an answer option, over 50% of the time, this is the correct answer. Okay, so if you're running late, or if you see that in something and you don't know the answer and you want to skip it from a time savings perspective too, at the end, the proctor says you have 5 minutes, run through, and any of the questions that say omit or delete that you don't have time to get to or you don't know the answer, if it says delete or omit, just go ahead and pick it, because over 50% of the time, like I said, that's the correct answer anyway. Okay. So it's good to be short. We don't hear that very often in high school, do we? But what this is referring to, again, I like to think of this as a nice guessing strategy as well. But if you're trying to understand which answer is the correct answer, here's an example for you. Again, this is using that sentence from the Defiant Civil Disobedience. So all of this casts doubt upon the purity of motives behind perhaps the most famous action of defiant civil disobedience ever perpetrated was the Boston Tea Party. Okay, so here, maybe you didn't have time to read the whole passage and you have 2 minutes left, you're not sure. You can come over here. Again, A is always going to say no change, just leave it as is. But the answer for, first of all, the reason that we already determined, which is that it's redundant. Okay, we already realized this is redundant. So we want to take something out. But even if we hadn't identified the redundancy in this sentence, we could then use this second strategy and say, well, I don't know, but this is the shortest answer, so I'm going to take it. Because usually the shortest answers are the most poignant, the ones that lack redundancy, they don't have the verbosity, and those are the things they're testing for. So there's a very likely chance that this is going to be the right answer, which it is. Okay. Oh, there you go. And it doesn't look like you guys are getting any of my sound effects either. I have to say, it's not very often that I'm not in the classroom. I usually do the long-term boot camps, and I'm not liking not being able to see your faces and interact with you as well. But I hope if again, Sue, if I'm going too fast or if there's questions, just please beep in and let me know. Okay, so testing strategy number 7. When you see a period, let me just pull up the, here we go. So you'll get something like this, and this is the question, okay? And there'll be a passage over here, a big long passage that you're reading, and there'll be something underlined, and they'll say, and so this would be the thing that's underlined in the passage. And they're going to ask you, is that the right punctuation? Should you change the punctuation? Where should you put it? And these are the examples that you give you. Whenever you see a period in something that's underlined in a test question, or any punctuation for that matter. So if you see a period here, you see a period here, these are 3 different examples, okay? So basically what this student had to do was they read an entire page that was a huge long passage, and in that page there were a couple things underlined. These were the 3 things that were underlined, and these were the 3 questions that she was given to answer. So this would have been question 1, question 2, question 3. You'll notice that each one of these has punctuation either in the question or it might be in the answer. Almost always, this is a trap. What they're doing is, one of the things that they're going to test you on is fragments. Okay, so if you don't know what a sentence fragment is, you might want to look that up between now and Tuesday. But if you don't have time, this is going to be a great flag for you. A red flag should go up in your head and say, okay, here's my fragment. They're testing me on it. Almost always, you want to choose the answer that takes out the punctuation that is interrupting the words, okay? So just know that when you see punctuation, whether it's in the question or if it's part of the answer option, that they are trying to test you on a fragment, and typically you want to take the punctuation away, okay? All right. This is another thing that you're going to be tested on. It's not a testing strategy, but this was an FYI that I wanted to put in there because it's if it's something that you haven't visited in a while, it's a very quick refresher. That's pretty much all you need. So they talk about subject verbs, conjunctions, and subordinate clauses. They're going to look to see if you know how these work together. So let me slow down. So for example here, the SV stands for a subject verb. Essentially, a subject verb is a portion of a sentence that can stand on alone. It can be independent of itself. So in this example, it's the person ran. It's followed by another subject verb. The person jumped. Okay, so whenever you have a subject verb followed by a subject verb, the punctuation that they're going to be testing you on is what goes in between them. There's 2 things that you can put between them. You can put a semicolon or you can put a period, either one. But sometimes you don't want to use a period because it doesn't flow as well. And so people will use fanboys. Now, fanboys is simply an acronym that I put up there that hopefully it'll be a nice way for you to remember what they are. They stand for, if you want to write this down in your notes right there, fanboys are the words for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. So, and what they do is they serve to, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on with my computer. I'm not touching my computer right now at all. I have no idea what that just was. Sorry. Oh, there's my English slide, by the way. Sorry, guys. Okay. Okay, so the words again, in case you didn't get a chance to write them down, were for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And again, all they do is serve to make to help the sentence flow a little better. And to give you an example, I want to just quickly read for you a small paragraph that has no coordinators, and I'm going to read the same clause with the coordinators, and you'll see that in both of the phrases, you understand what I'm trying to say to you, but when you add the coordinates, it flows so much better. Okay, so fans love to watch Anna. She dances beautifully. She is a graceful dancer. People enjoy watching her. She hasn't taken dance lessons. She doesn't need to. Her technique is unconventional. The effect is striking. She can fill an audience with joy. She can bring people to tears. Other dancers try to imitate her. They have not succeeded. She is talented. She will attract fans for many years to come. So I structured it in this way on purpose so that I could include every single one of those fanboys I just gave to you. Listen to how it sounds when you add each of those words, the for, and, etc. Okay, fans love to watch Anna. for she dances beautifully. She is a graceful dancer and people enjoy watching her. She hasn't taken dance lessons, nor does she need to. Her technique is unconventional, but the effect is striking. She can fill an audience with joy, or she can bring people to tears. Other dancers try to imitate her style, yet they have not succeeded. She is talented, so she will attract fans for many years to come. So you hear the difference there. They're not necessary, but they certainly help. And that's something to keep in mind also when you're going to write your essay. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on fanboys and what their purpose is and why they're important. Okay. Again, you might have the subject verb. You can add a conjunction in between if you do not want to use the period or the semicolon that we talked up above. So you can use conjunctions there. A subordinate clause is basically just the complete opposite of a subject verb. So a subject verb can stand alone. You can put a period at the end and it can be by itself. A subordinate clause, it needs a subject verb to go with it. It cannot stand alone. So in this example, the subordinate clause is in the race. So it's in the race, the person ran. It simply serves to offer more clarity to the sentence, to the subject verb, basically. So the subordinate clause can come before or after the subject verb. The person ran in the race. Okay, so if it comes first, you have to have the punctuation in between. If it comes at the end, you don't need it. So I said I wasn't going to spend any time on content. This was a little deviation, but I wanted you to understand the importance of fanboys because that also will apply to your essay. And just, it's something that you see so often. I just wanted you to know the rules of a subject verb and a subject verb. Again, it's simply going to be either a conjunction, a period, or a semicolon. You have your fanboys. If anybody didn't catch those, let me know afterwards. I can stay on the line afterwards. And then subordinate clauses, if they come first, you need to have some sort of punctuation like a comma. And if they come last, you won't need any. All right, that takes us to our time management tip number 6, which is brackets or blocks. I love this tip. And it's going to be a little bit difficult to explain it without a test in front of you. So work with me here. Don't worry, I'm not going to read this whole huge thing to you. But the brackets or blocks, this is one of the longest parts of the English section where you have to read a whole passage, and they will ask you little things throughout the passage. So, for example, in some of the other strategies I just gave you, I had said, okay, you saw these 3 things were underlined. So when you're looking at this paragraph, maybe Earth's overall surface would be underlined. And then you'd come over here and there'd be a question about those 3 words. So what's nice about that from a time management perspective is at least if you didn't grasp the whole 2 pages that you just read, at least the question also tells you exactly where the answer is. You know that question number 13 is right here because it's underlined with a little 13. There is, however, this type of a question, and if you know this strategy, it will save you a lot of time. It usually comes towards the end of all the questions, but you'll see one of 2 things. You'll either see brackets that number the paragraphs throughout the passage. So if you're starting off the practice says time, and somewhere in that passage you see a couple paragraphs that have brackets around them, immediately go and find any questions. Normally we don't say go read the questions prior because that takes up too much time. But for this one case, you'll want to do that because what you're going to get is a question that it's going to pose a question about the passage as a whole. And whenever we do this in a full boot camp, we get to this question and I'll ask the students, okay, how many of you, when you got to this question, were like, seriously, now I have to go back and reread the whole passage? If I had known about this the first time I read it, I would have been paying attention to at least this one question. So by recognizing this, quickly go find the block question because the other questions won't have this big block around it. And so you'll be able to at least read this one question and say, okay, as I read this, I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to the ordering of the paragraphs that make the most logical sense. Okay, so that's a great time management tip. Just make sure, just be aware if you see brackets, go find your block question. Okay. All right. This moves us into our time management tip number 7, which is make sure that, again, the proctor is supposed to alert you to when there are only 5 minutes remaining in that section. It's not unheard of that they start doing their Sudoku or their crossword puzzle and they don't realize it until 2 minutes or forget altogether. So this is something you want to be managing. You have your watch. You wrote down the time of the start of that section. It was 10:37. You know that you now have 5 minutes left. Use this time efficiently. So remember, we said don't ever leave any blanks on the ACT. You are not docked for wrong answers. You're simply giving up the opportunity, a 25% chance of getting the answer right, and you'll get credit for that. So use that time first to finish up any questions you think that you can get through quickly in those 5 minutes and answer correctly. Then if you're running out of time, make sure that if you have 7 questions left, just go down and bubble them in, bubble something in. And then finally go back and check the questions that you had circled. Again, hopefully you had lined out your bad answers, so when you're on number 45, you can go back to question number 3. You don't have to reread it. Worst case scenario, you've lined out 2 of those options, so now if you have to guess, at least you're now guessing with a 50% probability of guessing correctly. Okay. Again, I said that ad nauseum, leave no blanks. But it's funny when we do this, I'm often surprised at we'll get through the 3rd practice test, and I always ask, okay, excuse me, now that I've graded this, did anybody leave any blanks? And there's still always a few hands that go up. It's hard when you get in your zone and you're working. It's hard to remember all these things. They're simple, but they definitely can make a difference. Okay. So now I want to move on to the essay, just because I think it's a nice branch of the English section, because so many of the things that we just talked about for the English section apply here. So the essay, you're going to get a second score for it. It's not going to be in with your English score, but all of those same rules and strategies apply. So again, you want to be there. Here again, they're going to be looking for verbosity. They're going to be looking for redundancy. They're going to be looking to see for irrelevance, and this is where irrelevance can really scream out, because as you're writing, you might kind of get off topic or off your thesis, and they actually are grading for that. So you want to make sure that you're staying on point. So I'm going to give you a few strategies for how to write a nice solid essay in the 30 minutes that you're given to do that. It's sometimes overwhelming to say, oh my gosh, it's the fear of the blank page. First of all, when you ask, well, why do they even do essays anymore? I mean, we have computers, we have spell check, but writing is an essential skill for college and your success there. They want to make sure, can you focus on an idea? Can you develop your ideas well with the grammar, sentence structure, and again, the rhetorical skills that you've developed? Are you able to develop logical arguments with data? So are you persuasive? You want to be able to show your ability to persuade during the essay. Again, back to sentence structure. This is usage and mechanics. You have proper spelling, proper sentence structure. And finally, can you write in a clear, concise, and organized manner? So this is their chance to see what you can do without the computer, without the spell check, without the Google. And it's really an opportunity to shine if you know what it is that they're looking for. Okay, so just briefly, I want to share with you how they score the essay, because that can be confusing for a lot of students. There's 2 people that are going to score your essay. Okay, so the score, the lowest score you can get is a 2. The highest is a 36. And people say, why not a 1? Well, it's because there's 2 people. So if they both give you the lowest score possible, you're still going to be walking away with a 2, which is certainly not our goal for today. Okay, but these are the things that they're looking for, and they're going to give you points in each of them. Okay, anything from 1 to 6 in these 4 criteria: ideas and analysis, development and support. This is your persuasion. Organization. This is a lot of your usage and mechanics. And rhetorical skills here. Okay, so that's how they score it. But what do you think the most common error is that students make when they go to write their essay? When I ask this question, typically students will say, is it spelling? They don't develop a thesis. They don't follow the thesis. Those are all good answers, and they're all things to pay attention for. But the biggest mistake students make is that they start writing immediately. Okay, and why do we do this? It's simple. It's the pure fear of 30 minutes are going to be up and out, and I'm not going to have anything written down here. So we just start writing frantically to make sure at least we have something on the paper. The problem is that this leads to a very jumbled, disorganized, poorly constructed essay. And they're looking for that. They're expecting it. And we have a very nice strategy that will help you avoid this first of all, the fear and the anxiety, but secondly, this disorganized, discombobulated thing that they're so often looking for. So first, to understand what the essay prompt, what it looks like, you're gonna receive a prompt. And this is new, by the way. In the past, they would give you just one prompt. So this is new for the ACT. They'd give you one prompt, and you would have to either decide if you agreed with it or you didn't agree with it and why. It allowed a lot more freedom, in my opinion. This kind of puts you in a tighter box, and it's also a little more time consuming. So if you were practicing the essay last year, I don't know if there are some seniors or juniors in here that have been working on this since your freshman year, you want to go back and look at the essay, because the structure of how the essay section is being run is now different. So you would read this prompt. I won't read the whole thing to you. But then you have to read, there's going to be one person's perspective, there's going to be a second person's perspective, and there's going to be a third person's perspective. What you need to do is first, even before you read those, just in your own mind, what is your own perspective? Try to decide. And it might be swayed by one of these three, which is something to consider. So consider your point of view. Then read the three perspectives and ask yourself, did my point of view change because of any of these three perspectives? If it did, a nicer way to help yourself out here is to just go ahead with that perspective. If it already persuaded you, then chances are likely that other viewers will find it persuasive as well. So and plus it gives you material from which to build from. Okay, so if you changed your point of view based on the reasoning, then you want to go with that. But if you feel that you have a point of view that's stronger than any of these three cases, go with it. Okay, go ahead and use your own perspective, and that will show some creativity and some independence of thought on your own. Okay, so just again, you want to make sure that you state your thesis. You want to make sure that you're telling them what your stance is. There is no wrong answer when you're doing the essay, and oftentimes students will feel, well, I think this, but the graders are probably going to think this because it's more kind to schools. You know, whether it's, I don't know, school uniforms or something like that. There's no wrong answer. And you don't want to be boring. So be bold in your first thesis sentence, which should be in your first paragraph. Okay. Then the strategy that you want to use, is we say take a bow. We call it taking a bow. And of course, this is an acronym. There's three things you want to do. The first thing you want to do is you want to brainstorm. Okay, so brainstorming is anything that you can think about the product, about the perspective or the point of view. Any thoughts for or against. You want to spend 2 to 4 minutes doing that, and then you want to take 3 to 4 minutes just to organize those thoughts and figure out where you want to place them in the overall essay. And we'll talk about each of these in a minute. But you have 2 to 4 minutes to brainstorm, 3 to 4 minutes to organize, which leaves you with 25 minutes to write the essay. Now, sometimes when I'm just right here, students will say, "Well, my gosh, I've already used up upwards of 8 minutes of the entire time, and I haven't even started writing my essay." That's okay. If you take the time to do these steps, this third step is going to be a lot easier and much more clear and concise. Okay, so when we talk about brainstorming, first of all, brainstorming can and should be your friend as long as you do this one thing, which is stick to your thesis. I don't know if you've ever done this in school, or if a teacher's up at the front of the room and says, "Oh, you guys, let's brainstorm this idea." And you start writing things on the board, and kids start shouting things out, and pretty soon you start looking at the board and you're like, how did we get all the way over here when we started all the way over here at A? So you can really get off topic just as long as you make sure not to do that. Brainstorming is going to work in your benefit. So things to talk about are personal observation. They say we're taught in high school not to talk in the I sentence or person, the first person. That's not true on the essay. We encourage you to do that, actually. No one is more important to you than you. No one's more interesting to you than you. And when you're interested in something, you tend to speak more enthusiastically and persuasively about it. Okay, so take examples. I mean, as high schoolers, you're not short on material and all the things that you're going through. And you can talk about a moral quandary, a turning point, some sort of realization. The other thing that I'll tell you is you're going to want to have some compelling examples of why your point of view is what it is. It's called supporting data. You're going to need to include that in a number of the paragraphs that you write. If you don't have any or you can't think of any, we say go ahead and make them up. These two people that are grading your essay, they take on average 2 minutes to grade an essay. It's horrible. You guys spend a half an hour fretting over this and stressing over it and putting together this wonderful, eloquent essay, and they give you 2 minutes to grade it. So they're not going to be Googling or to fact check the statistics in your essay. So go ahead and make them up. As long as they're reasonable, they could make sense. They just want to know, if you have that data, would you be able to use it in a clear and compelling manner? Okay. So if you can't think of the real facts, go ahead and make some up. All right. Organizing. So when we talk about organizing the essay, and again, this is in that second step. You want to do this before you actually start writing. Think of the power of 5. So thinking of writing a whole long essay can feel a little overwhelming. But if you say, all I have to do, I have to write 5 paragraphs. And in those paragraphs, it's pretty simple. My first paragraph is simply my introduction. This is my point of view. This is where I'm going to have impact. This is where the reader's going to say, wow, okay, I know what this person's wanting to talk about here, and this is where they stand on this issue. Okay? Then you have 3 more paragraphs. These are where you're going to want to use those supporting pieces of evidence, 1, 2, and 3. Okay? If you chose the 4th point of view, make sure that you are addressing the other 3 perspectives in that point of view. So you want to show that you can see the big picture, that you've considered those other viewpoints, and that you still have a different one, and these are the reasons why. Okay, so that shows that you can see the whole picture. And then finally, your fifth paragraph is simply your conclusion. You're restating your point of view. You're summarizing all the points that you made in the body of the essay. And you have closing remarks, which are optional, but sometimes this is a nice place to put a little twist in there to leave the reader thinking or reflecting on something. So it demonstrates ability. It shows your ability to demonstrate insight and again some creativity. So the way I've always looked at this power of 5 essentially is I'm going to tell the reader what I'm going to tell them, and then here in my 3 paragraphs I'm going to tell them, and then here in my conclusion I'm going to tell them what I just told them. Okay, so tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. So when you look at it like that, it's a lot more digestible. Any questions on the essay? I usually get a lot of questions on that. Sue, would you mind just doing a quick check-in with everyone and maybe throwing a chat or a unmuted, we're good, my way? Can I get a check that you all can still hear me? No, Questions before the math section. Take 5 minutes. Okay, sounds good. And actually, I'm gonna give you guys like 1 minute right now to I'm gonna ask if this is okay to just stand up. Don't move around. Just stay where you are, but stand up and stretch. Okay, so just take 1 quick minute to stand up and stretch. You guys have been sitting a long time, and I can't see who's sleeping and who's not. Okay. I'm going to ask everyone to be seated now if you are not already. That was a little bit of a selfish break, too. I use that opportunity for cough medicine. My apologies for the cough. I can't seem to kick it. Okay. So is everyone seated and all excited about their essay right now, I hope? All right. So just as a quick review, remember when you don't start writing right away, do not freak out. Go ahead, go through, read the passage, consider your point of view, then read the following 3 perspectives. Decide if any of them were persuasive enough to change yours. And if so, that's probably the strong one that you want to go with. Otherwise, if you still feel strongly about your own viewpoint, go with that, but don't forget to consider or at least mention or refer to those other 3 perspectives and why that's not yours in the body of your essay. Take the bow. Spend 2 to 4 minutes brainstorming, spend 3 to 4 minutes organizing. Again, I can't stress the importance of that. I've written super long essays, and unfortunately, because you don't have a computer, you can't just cut and insert it somewhere else, where I've written the whole thing, and I thought, this is so great, but it would be so much more impactful if this sentence or if this paragraph had been before that paragraph. You're not going to have time to change that, okay? So make sure that you spend the time organizing, and then you'll have a good 25 minutes to go ahead and write the rest of it. The power of 5, just think of it as 5 paragraphs, your introduction, your 3 supporting pieces of evidence, and your conclusion. You're telling them what you're going to tell them, you're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them what you just told them. All right? And then some of you may think I'm from another planet when I give you this strategy, but we have found that it is one that works. My thing isn't working again. My numbers locks isn't on, but my clicker is not working. Well, he fixes. Let me just get this out. Okay, I don't know why it's not working, but yeah, Brennan works on that. One strategy is to study the essay prompts in advance. So you'll think, well, did it work for you? Did it work for you? Okay. I guess I have to click on that. I was trying to click on this. It's using before. The reason that you want to do this is that you'll find that a lot of the prompts are very similar in that they all fall in line with certain topics. So they're usually social issues. Oftentimes they're geared towards education, free rights, constitution issues, basically something that has to do with some sort of human rights. Even in the example that I just shared with you, I don't know if some of you had a chance to read it while it was up, but it was talking about a zoning issue in the city. and the city was going to basically purchase someone's home because they needed to use it for a quarry. And so is it the right of the city to, buy this person's home that they don't want to sell for the betterment of the community? So is it the individual person's right? Is it the right of the community? Is it the right of the government? You'll see that the themes are very similar. So first of all, that's one reason that you if you read it and it's not a prompt you've read, but it's similar, your ideas are still going to be there about where do I stand on this issue of human rights, fill in the blank, whatever the topic actually may be, or our legal rights. So the themes are very similar across the board for the different prompts that you're going to get. So you'll get used to that, and you'll start to develop some strong opinions and typically some strong supporting data that can be used very blanketly across the different types of prompts that you'll receive. The other reason that it's a great idea to study the prompts in advance and practice is just so that you get used to the BOW strategy that we just went through. Okay. And then just some last, these aren't actual strategies or tips, but these are just some insight or FYIs that we like to share with you. You are allowed to write in cursive, but we strongly encourage you to print. The reason being is that if you have these great ideas, but no one can read them, they can't give you credit for them. And when they transfer the documents, a lot of times the cursive, all the top loops of the letters can get cut off, surprisingly, or if you can believe it. So we encourage you to print if you're used to writing in cursive. Of course, be clear, concise, and legible. Again, they're going to be looking for proper sentence structure, your usage of mechanics, your rhetorical skills, proper grammar, correct spelling. You can erase, so you can do that, but you can also scratch things out, which I think saves time. So don't be afraid to. You're not going to be docked if you have words that are lined out and you've put another word there. Okay, so they're not going to be testing you on how pretty does this piece of paper look, but they are going to be looking at, was the grammar there? If you do have a great vocabulary, this is a perfect time to show that off. Just to talk a little bit about the scoring. So a perfect score would be a 6 in any of those given things. So remember, obviously your best score is a 36, but then you have to divide that between the two readers and the subsections. So to get a 4, which is a good score, to get a score, you just want to make sure, here it says answer the question. I don't like how that's phrased because there is no right or wrong answer, but it's did you address the issue? I think is a better way to say that. Again, did you support it with ideas and examples? Did you show logical thought and organization? Again, this speaks to also your level of persuasion. And did you avoid major grammar, punctuation, and sentence structure errors? Okay. So if you can do that, you have a pretty solid score between the two scores. To get a 5 or a 6, you want to make sure that you've addressed the topic in depth. Okay, did you develop and support these with very good, strong examples and evidence? Again, did you use the power of 5? Was it organized? And again, I talked about vocabulary, but your language use. How did you use your transitions? Again, I shared with you those fanboys and how that helps helps with the flow of your thoughts. I talked about the conjunctions and how you use those independent and subject verb clauses. So just those sorts of things. That's what they're looking for. And once again, I think, this is one other thing. They say in the rules, when you read anything online or whatnot about the essay, they'll say that the length of it doesn't matter. So there's two things to consider with that. Technically, that's true. You're not being scored on how long your essay is. And but we found that the higher scoring essays tend to be the longer ones. And I say that with a little bit of hesitation for one reason. You don't want to make an essay longer just for the sake of making it longer, because there you run the risk of getting dinged for verbosity, redundancy, adding things that aren't relevant. So they're looking for that. But if you can get into things in a little more depth, of course, that's going to create some additional length to the essay. And what we found is that while they say it doesn't matter, you see that the longer essays typically are the ones that tend to score higher. Okay. So that's what it says in the book, and then what we've found here. All right. Any other questions with that? Brendan, how do I pull the chat up here? I can't remember if you said you wanted a break before or before the math section. Okay, so you guys, we're going to be moving in the math section right now. I have that it's 10 after 12. So why don't we plan on reconvening at 12:15? Is that good, Sue?
That will be at 10:15 your time.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Never. You're not getting a 2-hour break, guys. So yeah, 10:15 your time will reconvene. Okay, is everybody back? We're going to move into the math section. And Sue, I'm going to let you give me an okay that everybody's seated and ready to go. And then we'll do that. Good. I don't know when you send that good, Sue. So let me know if I know sometimes people get out of the room or they take a restroom break or whatnot. So I just want to make sure most everyone's there. Oh, okay, we're all good. Okay, I got it. All right. So I won't be able to hear you, but go ahead and use your voices. How many of you are nervous about the math section? Typically, when I'm doing these with large groups of students, math is usually the section that students have the most anxiety about. And so the first thing I want to do is just kind of quell your fears here and let you know that while in the math section, while you're going to be evaluated on a huge variety of things, nothing is going to be in depth. Okay, so it's not going to be difficult math. If you find yourself going into really intricate mathematical calculations to try to get to the answer, chances are you're going down the wrong path. The reality is that most of these questions, well, all of these questions can be done without a calculator, and we'll talk about calculators in a minute, but nothing's going to be in a lot of depth. So the nice thing is that any excuse me, any brief overview will be very helpful for you. Things as simple as, think about it, you might get a test question on this section, the math section, that says, is 1 a prime number? Yes or no? I mean, it probably wouldn't be yes or no, but it might be one of the 4 answers. List the prime numbers, and 1 would be in there. So I'll ask a group, is 1 a prime number? How many of you guys think that it is? How many of you guys think that it isn't? Okay, 50% of you said yes to the first, and 50% of you said yes to the second, is what I'm going to assume. But 1 is not a prime number, but most students think that it is. Well, that's really easy. I mean, all you had to do is no, it's not. Okay, well, now I just got the answer correct. You didn't have to learn a bunch of math to know the right answer from that. So prime numbers, it's not something that's hard to know. It's just we haven't done that since, like, I don't know, 2nd grade. I don't even know when we learned prime numbers. 4th grade, I'm not sure. But it's been so long since we've ever visited that we've just forgotten. So those are the sorts of things that are going to trip you up on the math section. It's not going to be because it's so in-depth and difficult. So I share that with you because I don't want you to be anxious about it. Okay, but what I can tell you is that math, if there's any section, and I know there's a number of you that are going to be taking this test on Tuesday, from what I understand. And if I tell people, if you only have one area that you have time to study, this is this area that it has been proven you can increase your score the fastest. And it's because of things like the example I just gave you. Going through, so for example, let me show you our first, I think my clicker, I don't have Brennan here now, I'm manning my clicker. Testing strategy number 13. This strategy alone is going to give you, I would say, if you don't know your formulas, just by learning them very quickly, and you do know your formulas, you just haven't looked at them, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If you go on Google, I should probably get that. Maybe at a break I'll get that for you. But I'm sure you could pull up basic math formulas and print out that one page. That's going to be 20 questions right there that you can easily get an answer on, because it's not that you don't know how to do the math, you just don't remember the formula. I also want to point out that this is new to the ACT. The SAT, they never gave formulas, but on the ACT, they always did, and people didn't know that. But on the first page, it would give you, how do you find the area of a triangle? How do you find the area of a cylinder? What's the Pythagorean theorem? It had all of that on there. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I flip-flopped that. The SAT, they do give you the formulas. Sorry. They give you the formulas on the SAT. And if people have questions at the end about the differences between the ACT and SAT, I can stay on, but there's a reason that on the SAT they give them to you and on the ACT they don't. So for here, you want to know what those are. So again, I will try to remember on our next break to try to find a nice Google page for you. But otherwise, just Google it and print them out and just make sure that you know all those basic formulas that you learned, you know how to do the math. But if you got a question on it right now, today, you probably wouldn't be able to do it just because you wouldn't know how to construct the math equation. Okay? So make sure that you know those formulas. The quadratic formula will be on there. The distance formula will be on there. Like I said, Pythagorean theorem, area of a triangle, the volume of a cylinder, those types of things. Okay? All right. Random difficulty. This is what makes the math section difficult for test takers. In math, you get very focused on whatever question it is that you're working on. You have 60 minutes to complete 60 questions. So for most students, the thought is, okay, I have 1 minute per question. That's not going to be a good strategy when you get to the math section. The reason being is you're not accounting for the questions that are going to be more difficult. On the SAT, we have a much different strategy because the math questions get increasingly more difficult. So at least you know what to expect. Here, they might throw one of the most difficult questions as number 6 on the exam, and it's far enough in that you're real focused and you're not really paying attention to time anymore. You're paying attention to the questions you have to answer. That the next thing you know, you spent 3 or 4 minutes on a test question. You don't get extra points for that question. You may or may not have gotten to the right answer, but the proctor is going to yell time is up, and you might find that you still have 25 questions you haven't gotten to. Some of the easiest ones being the last 10. Okay, so this is a strategy I want everyone to pay attention to because it's important. Make sure that when you're managing your time during the math portion, that you do the math in 2 passes. Okay. So this again is why you have to be cognizant of the time. You have to have that watch and be looking out for it. And what you do is you want to do all of the easy questions you can. So you do all 60 of the questions in like the first 40 minutes. Okay, so the first pass you give yourself 30 to 40 minutes. Go through so that if numbers 58, 59, and 60 are super easy, you didn't miss the opportunity to answer those and to answer them correctly and get credit for them. Then on your second pass, that's when you want to go through and work out the longer ones. So leave yourself, 15 to 25 minutes for that. Again, I've said this a million times, don't ever leave any of the questions unanswered. So when that proctor says 5 minutes, make sure you're going through and at least bubbling anything that you don't have time to get to. And on this third part here that I just mentioned on the second pass, as you're going through in the first pass, one thing that I suggest is that, normally you like circle the questions that you're going to skip and go back to. But I would also maybe have a system for that. Like a circle is ones for, I know I can get the answer, I just need a little bit more than a minute. Maybe I'm going to need 2.5 minutes for it. And then maybe an X for the ones that are, or a check mark for the ones where, okay, I think I can get the answer, but I know it's going to take more time. And then for the ones that you have an X on it, again, it doesn't matter how much time I have. I can have all the time in the world. I don't know how to do this problem. I wouldn't even put a mark by those. I would just guess on those so that you don't waste your time on them. Okay, maybe you'll guess correctly and get an extra point. All right, but this is a very, very important tip for this. Over 75% of students, just so you guys know, nationwide, they don't complete the math section, and it's because they run out of time. Okay, so make sure that you don't forget to do the two passes. The other thing I wanted to talk about are your calculators. Okay. So yes, you can use your calculators. It will be important that you go to ACT.org to make sure that your calculator is one that is allowed. I don't know how strict. I mean, they're strict that it has to be one. I don't know how strict it is, but there are certain types of calculators that are not allowed in the test, and you don't want to get there on test day and they say you can't bring your calculator in, because even if you don't need it, it's going to cause you anxiety. Okay, so make sure that you know that you have the right thing. And calculators can help you. Of course, there's some questions that are going to require not difficult calculations, but more tedious. So whether it's, division or whatnot. They can certainly save you time. One thing I like to warn everyone about, don't go out and buy a brand new calculator the night before the exam. Use one that you know and that you're comfortable with, so you're not questioning how to use it or how to use the functions, or you forgot to put the batteries in, whatever. But while we're talking about this, I do want to mention something about the calculators, which is a little story about them. Back in the olden days when I took this exam, they didn't allow calculators. And then there was this big to-do about, this isn't fair. This is how students, do math in the classroom. So you shouldn't, it's an unfair advantage to not let them use them then in the test. And this isn't real world, whatnot. So finally, the powers that be at ACT.org, or I'm sorry, at the ACT, they said, okay, fine, we're going to let students use calculators. But of course, wanting to look at the behavioral science behind it, they wanted to evaluate everything that students did. How did this affect behaviors, et cetera, yada, yada. And what they found, first of all, they were expecting to see two things. They were certainly expecting to see nationally, test scores overall to increase. But the first thing they found was that when the proctor would say time, go ahead and start, students would actually reach for their calculator before they would even reach for their pencil, demonstrating how much of a crutch we use this on. And the other thing they found was that the students that scored higher on the test scores tended to be the students who used the calculator the least. Okay, so again, they can help you. They can certainly be a time saver when it comes to tedious calculations and whatnot, but just make sure that you think before you calculate. I know for me, if I have it there, I want to use it. And all of a sudden, it could be, 30 plus 20 as part of the equation. And I know 30 plus 20 is 50, but just to check my work, I'm going to make sure to quickly type it in to make sure that I'm not having a brain hiccup at this moment. That's going to end up taking up time. And again, your brain works faster than your fingers are going to work on the calculator. And you can also have keystroke errors. And that's the other thing. I don't know if I have it on. No, I don't have it on here. That's one other thing I want to warn you about that's not in here. But with this behavioral science that they did, they know exactly the most common keystroke errors that students make when they're doing equations. I know that sounds crazy. They actually have studied this, and they do know those. And because of that, they make sure that those mistakes are included as answer options. And it gives you a false sense of security when you see an answer come up on your calculator and you see that it's one of the answer choices on the written exam. So you say, this cannot be a coincidence, and you choose that as the answer. When you're right, it wasn't a coincidence, but it was a design to trap you. Okay, so just make sure you're using your head first. I'll give you a simplistic example. If you had a school teacher with second graders, and she was going to give, 8 times 2. Okay, so 8 times 2 is 16. Or maybe I should do 2 times 4. Maybe that's easier. Okay, so for a kid, 2 times 4, that'd be 8. Okay, we know the answer is 8, but they would also have in there 4 as an answer in case they divided it. They would have 6 in there in case they subtracted it. They would have, what did I miss? Multiplication in there. So anything that you could have done wrong with the problem, those would have been the other listed answer choices. So I just want you guys to be aware of that, okay? All right, and that's my calculators. Story problems. I do want to spend a little bit of time on story problems because they are 1/3 of the test. I always hated story problems. I don't think I'm alone with this. But here's the thing. The deal with story problems is that they're real life scenarios. I mean, sometimes they're ridiculous ones, but at least they're applied to real life scenarios. And the problem is we don't learn, we learn math like A plus B equals C, but that's not how you apply math in the real world. So we're not used to story problems. You're walking through the mall with your friend, you don't, look at a pair of jeans and say, oh, that's on sale. Will you solve for X for me so I know how much they are? We don't talk like that. We don't apply math to our daily life that way, but unfortunately it's how we teach it in the classroom. And that's what gets us so stumped on these story problems. So what I want you to know is that the math that you're going to be doing in these problems is easy. It's just figuring out what the problem is that's difficult. How am I supposed, if I were simply to say to you, oh, all you have to do is multiply 100 times 0.6, you'd say, oh, I can do that. but reading the problem, you didn't know to do that. Okay? So one of the things that I want to do for you is, and this is going to seem very elementary, but what I want to do is demonstrate or show you what words apply to what symbols, so that when you're reading a word problem in your mind, you're picturing how to set up the equation. Okay? So when you see an equal sign, you guys all know what that means, but the words that would constitute putting an equal sign into the equation would be is, was, it will be, it has, its costs, adds up to, is the same as. All right? When you're told to multiply, again, you all know what that means, but in a word problem, that's going to show up as times, it's a product of, it's a multiple of, it's twice of this, it's double that, it's triple this, it's half. All of those are simply multiplication. Okay, so it's what do the words and the math mean together is what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So if you read something that says this out of that, or each of these, or this was a ratio of this by that, or we divided this bucket by, with it, all of that is the division symbol. So as you're reading the paragraph, these are the things you want to be writing down so that you can end up at the end of reading it with a math equation written down. Okay, so we all know what plus is. If you see the word combined, if you see the word more than, or a total, all of that is going to be your addition. And then finally, for your subtraction, if you see something that says the difference between, that's subtraction. It was decreased by. This is less than that. We subtracted one from the other. All of that is your minus sign. Okay? So I believe you have a copy or a printout of these slides, so I'm assuming you're not all having to write this down. So I'll continue, but hopefully if you can just look at this, and if you start practicing a little bit of reading word problems, you can start to, what you want to be doing is, as you're reading it, be writing what the mathematical equivalent equation would look like as you go. All right. This is a testing strategy that will help you out quite a bit with some of these word problems. If you're looking at something and you're like, I have no idea how to solve this, try plugging in a number that's easy to work with, like 100. Let me give you an example. This is an ACT math question that we pulled just as an example for you. But it says if a positive number is increased by 70%, then the result is decreased by 50%. Which of the following most actually describes the net change? So some people, this might be easy. Others, you might be glossed over, like, what? It's increased by 70%, but then that's decreased by 50%, and then what's the net change, So what you can do here is just try plugging in the number 100 and seeing what happens. If you say, okay, a positive number, okay, the number 100. If it's increased by 70%, what do we have? Well, 70% of 100 is 70, and that's what my first number was increased by, so I have 170. Then the result of that, well, the result was my 170 is now decreased by 50%. Okay, remember we already saw that 50%, that means we're doing division, decreased by, that means we're subtracting. So 50% of, what did we have, 170 is 85. All right, well, which of the following most accurately describes the net change? Well, basically they're asking me what is the change from 100, which was my first positive number, to what I have now, which is 85. And my answer is 15%. Okay, so you see the math there, but all we did was we multiplied the 100 times 70%. We got our 170. We divided by 50% because it said decreased by 5. So we got that number. And then we subtracted it, the net change, and we got 15. So that's a nice strategy for just plugging in problems when you don't know what to do. This is your TAN strategy. I would like, I don't know what you have on your printed slide, but if it's not on there, I'd like you to actually draw this triangle. Okay, TAN. First of all, these are your averages questions. So one of the things they might try to catch you on is the vocabulary. Students sometimes get median, mean, and mode mixed up. So just as a quick review, once we just go through this, you'll know it for test day. The mean is just the average. The median, when they're referring to that, they're just talking about the middle number or digit in a series of numbers that are in order. Okay, and then the mode would be the number that occurs most frequently in any given instance. Okay, so but typically they're going to be talking about the mean, but they might throw some of that vocabulary in there just so you know the difference. So this is your tan triangle, and you are going to get a lot of average questions. So don't when you see just these random strategies, you can be like, well, why did they throw that one out there? These are basically the things that you're going to encounter most frequently or most often when you take the test. So all these strategies are designed around the test questions that come up most frequently through those 60 questions that you'll see. Average questions seems to be very popular on the test, and this strategy is going to help you out quite a bit. So when you say, well, what does this T, A, and N mean? So when you get an average of something, you're basically taking the total of what you have and dividing it by whatever you're trying to find the average of. So for example, if I have 10 marbles, okay, that's my total. My total would be 10, and I'm trying to find out the average of white marbles. And if I have 10 marbles and 5 of them are white, 5 would be my N. That's what I'm looking to try to find. So my average would be 50% because I would have 10 marbles that are divided by the number of what I'm trying to solve for, which is the white marbles. So 10 divided by my 5 white marbles gives me 50%, which is my average. So if I'm solving for the average, so the nice thing here is that you can use this triangle. They might, that was an average, but they might say, what's the total? Or they might say, what's the number? Basically, you can use this triangle. They're always going to give you 2 inputs. And if you think of this line here right under the T as a division sign, and look at this one that divides the A and the N as a multiplication, you can look here that the average, if they're asking for you to solve for average, it's simply the total divided by the number. If they're asking you to solve for the total, it's the average times the number. And if they're asking you to solve for the number, okay, it's the total divided by the average. Because this comes up so much, I want you guys to have a chance to practice it once. So this is another test question that you'll get. And I want you guys to try to use your tan. Okay? So if the average of A, B, and C is 40, and the average of X and Y is 50, what is the average of A, B, C, X, and Y? Now, unfortunately, that gave you the answer. Hopefully you guys didn't see it, but I'd like you guys to try to work through it if you didn't see the answer. So normally I'll ask the whole group, how many of you say the answer is 40? How many of you say it's 44, 45, 46, 50? The most common answer, I'm assuming a lot of you guys got it correct because this is how you do the problem. It's 40 plus 40 plus 40, 50 plus 50 divided by 5. The most common answer is 45. And the reason being is because they say, okay, 40 plus 50 is 90. 90 divided by 2 is 45. Okay? Because they have 2 numbers and they divide it. What they didn't do was they didn't use their tan. Okay? If they had used their tan, they would have known that their number was not, okay, they weren't dealing with 2 numbers. They're dealing with 5 numbers, okay? So they had to add all these. There's 3 numbers here to add up, and there's 2 numbers here to add up, all right? So you had to have 5 numbers. So they had this number here be 2 when this number had to be 5. So the most common answer, which of course is going to be one of the options because they always put the mistakes that we make as an option, is 45. And it's because, and that's why, because when I show this example, it kind of seems like, oh, give me a break. I know how to find the average. I don't need this tan strategy. But then I give them this problem. My goodness. I give them this problem and they confidently raise their hand and say, yeah, the answer is 45. And I say, you didn't use the tan. You used 2 as your T instead of 5. Okay? All right. So very similar to the tan, which is another testing strategy that I want you guys to draw, is I call it DIRT. These are the going places problems. I know everybody's familiar with these. This is where Johnny jumps in the river and swims across and, you know, falls down the current 3 miles and then bikes somewhere else for no apparent reason. You get a lot of going places problems, and it works just like the tan. But they're asking you, they're going to be asking you to solve for the distance, the rate, or the time. Again, I talked about median and mode, and not to get messed up with those. Again, back to the story problems and knowing what the words mean. If they're, aside from just rate, if they're asking you to find the velocity of something, or they're asking you to, what is the speed, you know, how many miles per hour were they going, or whatnot, those are all your DIRT. So if they're asking for rate, velocity, speed, distance, time, all of that will fall into this DIRT problem, okay? So, and again, it's just like the tan. So you want to think of this line where the T is, its distance equals rate times time. So this is a division sign, and this is, here is a multiplication. So if they were to ask you to solve for your rate, you divide the distance by the time. If they were to ask you to solve for time, you divide the distance by the rate. And again, if they ask you to solve for the distance, it's the rate times the time. Okay. All right. Moving on to what's one of my favorite strategies. It's called the middle advantage. This is a great strategy if you do not know what the answer is. Okay, so what you do is basically, by using this strategy, you would only have to work this problem 2 times to get the right answer. One of the nice little things to know about the ACT is when they give you answer options, they always give them to you in ascending or descending order, which is a great thing to take advantage of if you know that. So okay, this is the question. All 200 tickets were sold for a concert. Some tickets were at 10, some were 5, and the total were $1,750. How many of the tickets were sold for $10? So if you're looking at that, you might, hold on. What, sorry? 150? Okay. 150, okay. That 15 minutes left? Sorry, guys, I'm just checking our time. We have how many minutes left? 15 minutes left. Okay, so we need to get through this within 15 minutes. Got it. Okay. So when you look at this, you're going to say, well, I have no idea how to do this problem. I don't know how to set it up. All you do is take the middle answer. Take 100 and plug it in. Okay, when you do that, you come to an answer, and if it's less than 1750, you know that this isn't the answer, and you know that anything smaller than 100 is not the answer. If you plug it in and you get more than that, you know that 100 isn't the answer, and neither of these are the answer. So therefore, the answer has to be A or B. Oh, they just disconnected me. I'm going to see how many more slides I have. 15 more minutes. Holy shit. Oh, they're not on the phone.
Okay, sorry, everybody. Looks like we lost audio there for a moment. Just a brief check-in. Sue, can you give us a response? Can you hear us again? Sue, checking in. Are you still there? Can you hear us? How many slides are left here?
I can go through them quickly.
Unless they disconnected because they needed to finish.
I don't know, but we need to figure out what happened, because that's, like, in this thing, every single minute counts.
Yeah.
Were you given 2 hours?
And you know why they couldn't hear us, right? They had to change the speaker cable. We have lost the program.
She said that?
Mm-hmm.
When did she say that?
She just texted me.
Oh, sounds like somebody did.
Okay, quick check, just to make sure everybody is on. Can you hear us again? If you can hear us, go ahead and give a chat response back that we're good to go. Okay, everyone can hear us. Program resume.
Okay, Sue, can you give me a quick check on how you guys are on time? I can get us through this, but I know we had some technical issues in the beginning here, and so I want to get us caught up if you guys need to get out of there at a certain time. While I wait to hear back from you, I'm going to continue on, but I'm going to leave this open. Oh, will she be, okay. Oh, okay. All right. So nonetheless, for the middle advantage, basically just take the middle answer, plug it in. If that's not the correct answer and it's too little, then you know your answer is either D or E. At that point, you could even guess, and at least you have a 50% chance of guessing it correctly. Or you can plug it in and get the right answer. I should also note, you see that there's 5 answer options here. Everywhere in the ACT, there's only 4 answer options, except for in the math section where you have 5. So your your probability of guessing correctly goes from 25 down to 20%. That's why this is such an important step. 20, okay, gotcha. Thank you for your response, Sue. Looks like we got that. So, okay. All right, so geometry tip. I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker, but we will get through them. This is important whenever you have geometry questions. If you know your rules of geometry, this won't matter much, but if you don't, a great tip for you is that it will say in the directions that it might not be drawn to scale. Oftentimes, if they're asking you a question about, is this angle bigger than this angle, and you don't know the rules of geometry, sometimes they will not actually draw the triangle to scale. So it doesn't look the way it's supposed to look. They might make it skinnier or fatter. So just you're allowed to draw in your book. Just go ahead and draw what the triangle should look like, and without doing any math, you can eyeball it and get the answer. So that's a little trick that you can use that will sometimes work if you do not know the rules of geometry. SOHCAHTOA. A lot of you haven't gone through trigonometry. You are going to encounter, I believe there are 3 trigonometry questions on the test. I can teach you everything you need to know about them in about 20 seconds here. So what they're going to do is they're going to give you a triangle like what you see here. There's going to be this funny little symbol. This is called theta. Okay, and they're going to ask you a question about theta. They're going to say, what is the sine of theta? What is the cosine of theta? What is the tangent of theta? And you're going to say, I have no idea. I don't know how to solve that. It is very easy, and these are a quick 3 easy test questions that you'll get correctly by knowing this little acronym, SOHCAHTOE. Just think about if you stump your toe, you have to soak it. So you SOHCAHTOE. Okay, just remember this stands for the sine. So this is how you solve for sine. This is your cosine. This is your tangent. And all you're doing is dividing the other 2 options. Okay, for sine, to get the answer, you just divide whatever's opposite of this theta, which is a 4, and you divide it by the hypotenuse. Oops, sorry guys. The hypotenuse is this long angle, or is this long line here, okay? It's the diagonal line. So if they ask for the sine of theta, your answer is going to be 4 divided by 5, opposite divided by hypotenuse, so it's 4/5. If they ask you for the cosine of theta, you're just taking the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. So what's adjacent to this little theta? It can't be the hypotenuse because that's its own thing. So it's the 3. So your answer is 3 divided by 5. If they say, what's the tangent of theta? The tangent is the opposite, O. Okay, opposite of this is 4, divided by what's adjacent to theta, which is 3, 4/3. That's all you need to know about trigonometry to do well with those three trig questions that you're going to encounter. Okay, we're going to jump into the reading. In the reading, you're going to have 4 different sections. In my opinion, this is what makes this section so difficult is that it comes later on in the exam. You're a little bit brain fried at this point, and candidly, the passages can be pretty boring. Okay, so it's nothing that's going to have you on the seat, on the edge of your seat with interest. These are what the 4 sections are. There's a literary component, which is like prose fiction, natural science. Do not worry if you don't know a lot about science. There is nothing scientific about it. They call it natural science. Humanities and social studies. As you go through these passages, these are the things that you're going to want to be paying attention to. So make sure to underline things. So when you're looking at the prose fiction, the narratives section, you want to understand the questions are going to pertain to the main story and the details of it. So characters, names, places, relationships. Again, the natural science is really, did you understand the point or the view of this section? Not did you analyze the numbers, and there are not going to be questions about analyzing any numbers. Humanities, it's really about the author's tone or their logic, similar to your essay section. And then social studies, it's not going to be about the details. So you want to be paying attention to the bigger ideas that they have in there. Do not skim. You look at this and it's very tempting to. They're long sections. You don't want to read through all of them. But what you don't want to be tempted to do is skim past it. It's a waste of time. You're going to need to read it to understand the full concepts of it. Okay? Secondly, it's okay to go down and read the questions first. That you can skim, but do it quickly. Read the questions so that you know what it is that you're looking for, but do not look at the answer choices, because those can, without you realizing it, it can direct your mind into thinking that that's what the author's tone is, when in fact it's not, and you wouldn't have read it that way had you not been alerted to some of the choices that you're going to have to pick from. Okay, so you can go ahead and read the questions first, do not look at the answers, and do not skim the actual reading passage itself. I do have a strategy for you that is going to be extremely counterintuitive, but for the time that you're given, by the way, you have these 4 passages, you're given 35 minutes to get through them. So if you just broke that down, that gives you just over 8 minutes per passage. The problem is that what most students do is they attempt to get through all 4 passages, and it doesn't leave them enough time. I'm hoping that, let's see, Yeah, let me just see something. Okay, good. This is what I wanted to show you. I want to make sure that was in there. Okay, so let me go to this first, or this slide first. Okay, so what happens is, and we actually test this when we do full boot camps where you have time to do a couple passages. Most students go through it too quickly. They get about 6 of the questions correct per passage. So each passage has 10 answers, I believe. So they get the 3 passages. Okay, so let's just start with that. So you're looking at, if you're getting 6 correct for all 4 passages, that's a 21. Okay, that 24, I'm sorry, you get 24 correct. That converts to a 21 score, okay, for that section. Now think of this. If instead, if you could imagine that you are able to read less and get more, this is a strategy that we found to be very effective. Don't plan on doing the 4 passages. Plan on doing 3 of the passages. This gives you 11 minutes per passage, which seems to make a large difference. And then it still gives you 2 minutes to guess at the 10 questions that relate to the 4th passage, okay? So what you want to do, we suggest that you read the paired passage last, that that's the one that you skip because it's twice as long as the other ones and it's time consuming, okay? But if there's another one that just looks too scientific for you or too detailed or too something that you just don't want to do that one, you can pick whichever one you want. We recommend the paired passage. Now you have time to read 3 passages slowly, and what we find is that they're getting 8 to 10 correct per passage. And then on the last passage, if you do have time to get to it, what you want to do is read the first passage of that section first, then go answer all the questions that pertain only to that. So they're broken out, okay? So while it's fresh in your mind, then go read passage B and answer the remaining questions. Okay, so that's how you want to approach this paired passage if you skipped it and then actually had time to do it. But if you don't have time to do it, let's look at what happens to that score if you only read 3 of the passages and you guessed on the 4th one. Okay, so I showed you here, normally the raw score is 24. Okay, so if you get 6 correct on each of them, that's 6 times 4, you get 24, which turns to a 21. If you read 3 passages instead, so you're only getting points for the 3, but you get 8 to 10 correct, you're now looking at a 24 to 30. So worst case scenario, you've read less and you're still at least at the same score, okay? If you guess at that difficult passage, even if you only get 2 or 3 of those correct, if you just did all B's or all C's for the passage that you skipped, you're going to get a couple of those correct. Now your raw score is 26 to 33. You're looking at 22 to 26 points. That's an increase of 1 to 5 points on your overall score for the ACT. That may not sound like a lot to some of you, but every 1 point that you increase puts you ahead of 250,000 students nationally. 1 point on this test is huge. So I think this is an outstanding strategy and also one that lends itself to kind of quelling student anxiety and that panic of trying to get through all of these in such a short period of time, okay? All right, an active pencil is an active mind. We want to encourage you to make sure that you're using your pencil as you're reading through these passages. Hopefully none of you will fall asleep, although I have seen it happen that someone actually fell asleep on the ACT. But you're going to be tired. Again, these aren't exciting passages. But more importantly, I know I'm guilty of this. Have you ever read, like you're reading your history book and you read an entire page from start to finish, and you get to the bottom and you're like, I have no idea what I just read. My eyes, I know, physically went across this page, but my mind was completely somewhere else. So by underlining, first of all, it will keep you alert and awake, but it will also help you focus on the passage so that you can answer the questions faster. All right, if you're looking for what to underline, again, the main idea, another big thing is logic reversal words. So logic reversal word is if someone says, oh, you did a great job on this test, and you want to say, oh, thanks, and they say, however, what do you know is coming next? You know something negative is coming. A logic reversal word changes the tone of the overall message of a sentence, even if it starts out positively or negatively. You know, you failed every single test this semester. Okay, is that good or bad? That's bad. However, or but, you know something up, I'm going to get extra credit. Something good is coming. So it reverses the tone, and this is very common that they'll give you a passage where through the entire thing they're saying yes, 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 and then right at the bottom they'll throw in a logic reversal word that will say, however, there is no true data to support this or something. And if you didn't catch that, you're going to assume that all the facts you read for those 5 paragraphs prior are all true. Or despite all of this, you know, plants continued to grow or flourish. And you're reading this whole thing about how all of these chemicals are hurting these plants, and yet the very last sentence or somewhere in that last paragraph, they throw in a logic reversal word. So make sure as you're reading that you're underlining those. Make sure that you're underlining anything that controls sequence. That'll help you with time. So if they ask you, in what year did this happen? Or was this the first, second, or third? Or which occurrence was this that happened? So second, third, which generation, which year? That will just help you so that you don't have to go back for looking things up. And then anything that defines relationships or emotions. So if they're going to be asking you questions about the author's tone, things like that, you want to be able to look those up quickly. Okay. I think we already went through this, but read the questions first, but not the answer options. So again, you can read the question, but do not read these answers because, again, they will tend to skew your mind as you're going through and reading it, and you might misread the author's tone based on something you read from one of the answer options, okay? All right, that completes and concludes our reading. All we have left now is the science section. Science, just like the math, is one of the other ones that seems to give a lot of students quite a bit of anxiety. You will be shocked to see how unscientific the science section is. You do not need to know how to do any science to get through this successfully. And I'll share some examples of that with you. Okay, skim past the jargon. This is the biggest thing. The goal here is to intimidate you with big words, a lot of jargon, to basically make you think that you're supposed to be understanding something that you feel there's no possible way you could understand. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. But just the jargon, all the big words, if you'll see a word and say, I don't know what that means, I can't do this problem. You don't need to know what it means to do the problem, is the point. So forgive me for, this is the only thing that I will read that's this long, but this is an example. This is an actual question that we pulled, but I also put in the 2 questions that accompanied this paragraph, and you'll see that none of this mattered. But imagine how freaked out you would be if you thought that it did, or at least some of you. I know I would be. The electrons in a solid occupy energy states determined by the type and spatial distribution of the atoms in the solid. The probability that a given energy state will be occupied by an electron is given by the Fermi-Dirac distribution function. I'd be like, what is that? Which depends on the material and the temperature of the solid Fermi-Dirac distribution functions for the same solid at 3 different temperatures and are shown in the following figure. By the way, it's important that you know, which it's not, it'll say, note, 1 electron, EV, equals 1.66 times 10 joules. EV and joules are both units of energy, and at energies above 15 EV, the probability of occupation at each temperature continues to decrease. They put that in there as if they're giving you a hint or some helpful aid in answering this question, and you would not have even needed to have read any of this slide in order to answer the questions. Okay, so here's the first question that came with this one, which was, based on the figure, the probability of a 5 EV energy state being occupied by an electron will equal 80% when the temperature of the solid is closest to what? Meanwhile, you're going back thinking, well, I know they told me this 1.66 times 10. None of that is pertinent to the question at all. So here are the answer options. Okay, can you see that? All right, and all you do is you say, oh, I don't know, I have no idea what they're asking me, but what's going on at 80%? Well, at 80%, they're asking me about 5 EV. Let's see. 80%. What's that 80%? It's all, oh, excuse me. Let me get that. Let's see. Let me enter down here. Okay. So if you look at 80% and you go to what they're asking for, which was the 25,000, it doesn't have it up here, but it says the 25,000. There you can see all you have to do is go to the 80%, go to 25,000 is demonstrated by these little dotted lines. Okay. So what's my answer? It's skipped. That skipped there. Did you guys see the 25,000, by the way, on that slide? Mine is skipping. Can you see the 25,000? I can see it there. No. All right. I don't know if your screen is doing what my screen is doing between these two. I don't know why it's okay. Okay, there we go. Mine's up. Sue, if you could just bleep me if these two aren't working for you. Okay, so here it says the steepness of the slope of each distribution function at the point where its value equals 50% is inversely proportional to the average kinetic energy of the atoms. Basically, who cares? Which of the following correctly ranks the three functions from least to greatest in order according to the average kinetic energy of the atoms? Oh, I don't know why this keeps happening. Okay, so here the answer is C because, or I'm sorry, the answer is D because what puts them in the order of, okay, it's 1,000, 10,000, 25,000. All they're asking for you is which of the following correctly ranks the three functions from least to greatest. All they're asking is which of these has these listed in order of least to greatest, which is D. It's pretty crazy. I wish we had more time for a few more of the examples because I have a million of them where it's literally basically what you want to know is don't look at any of the jargon, just go exactly to the question. None of this mattered, none of this mattered, just what's in red mattered. They're asking you where are these three functions ranked in order, and the answer is D. Okay. All right, one main method per section. So you're going to have three different sections, and this is what they're going to be looking at. One is data representation, one is research summary, and one is conflicting viewpoints. All right, the good news here is that really, if you can just do the data representation is just charts and graphs, and for charts and graphs, it's just about identifying trends, variables, and patterns within the charts and graphs. It's not really about science, but more about how you read the charts and graphs. The research section are experiments, and with those, all you need to do is simply map the experiment. And what that means is identifying what is the purpose, identifying what the method was, and what the results were. And if you can do those three things to map it out, you'll be able to answer the questions correctly. And then finally, you have the reading passage, which is basically conflicting viewpoints in the science section. And here the method is simply to identify the two scientists' hypotheses and what their supporting data is. If you can identify those, you'll be able to answer the questions relatively easily. Okay, another tip for you is that you want to do the data representation first. Okay, so that's the charts and graphs. You have these passages have 5 questions each. You want to match the units in the questions with the appropriate part of the chart or graph. The good thing is that the questions are in order of difficulty. So you'll know that from a time management perspective. And again, this is the purpose of experiment, the method employed, and what the results are. And you'll be able to find the results pretty easily from there. The passage section, which usually comes second, you want to, well, first of all, you need to know that you do not need to pre-read the passage, okay? You want to go directly to the questions, skim through the data. This is completely unlike the reading section. So you're going to be able to find the answers from the reading, but really by skimming through, you'll be able to find them pretty quickly. All right, conflicting viewpoints. We've got about 2 slides left and we are done. How are we doing on time? Good to go. Okay. So the conflicting viewpoints, this passage is essentially, again, it's the two conflicting viewpoints. You want to do this one last because it takes the most amount of time. First of all, even if it's the first passage, just make sure you skip it and do it last. It's longest and you don't get extra credit for that. So do the charts and graphs first, then do the reading passage. Then go ahead and read the first scientist viewpoint. Answer any questions that are pertaining just to scientist number one, just like you did with the reading section. Then go ahead and read the second scientist viewpoint and answer any questions that pertain to scientist number two. And then from there, you can answer the rest of the questions that are comparing the two of them. Okay, so I think you have all that on your slide. So those are really all the three things that you're going to encounter on the science section. So it's the data representation, research summary, conflicting viewpoints. And they're very, very straightforward. Do not have any stress or anxiety about the science section. I've actually had students come up to me and say how disappointed they are that the science section wasn't more scientific because it's their best subject. Okay, are there any questions regarding those three sections in science? Okay. And that leads us to our last slide. So I want to thank you all for your patience with the beginning of this. I know we had some problems, I guess, with the cable and getting us all connected. If you have, I'm going to stay on for a couple minutes, at least until I'm told otherwise, to answer any specific questions that any of you may have had, or anything pertaining to anything outside of the content that we had relative to the ACT or the SAT. I'll be happy to answer any questions for you. And thank you all for your time. I wish all of you a ton of luck on Tuesday. Again, if you're going to study anywhere, go to the math. That's the fastest place to pick up extra points quickly. Make sure you review your formulas. Go on to Google and just check those out. I'm sure there's a quick printout. But I hope you found this helpful, and I enjoyed spending the morning with you. Thank you.